Hey guys, this is Bruce from Modern DriveLine.
We're going to show you an installation of a T5 transmission.
Hey, we've got some exciting things to show you here at MDL. 1967 Chevelle, owned by a gentleman named Mike. He originally had this car as a 4-speed and he wanted a 5-speed. We're going to show you the journey today and how we took out a 4-speed Muncie in place of a 5-speed. This car originally was a small block automatic car. Mike had converted over to a nice 396 big block and a 4-speed, kind of the love of his life. In his retirement, he's enjoying this car immensely, but he wanted an extra gear. So at this point, we're going to show you the journey of how MDL basically came up with the proper shift mechanism to make it fit the car and not the other way around. Now, in this particular instance here, this car has a console. We wanted to get the shift position, the correct location. So with a standard TKX transmission, the shifter is normally on the center line. At MDL, we basically put our side shifting program together, moved it 2 inches left. We do the same kind of program for our Corvette C2, C3. On the Ford side, we do some Tiger modifications so that we can match the original 4-speed location. So as we go through the features of the transmission, you're going to see how we basically are not modifying the tunnel. TREMEC did an excellent job with their end loading design where it allowed the transmission to be smaller for these A bodies and no tunnel modifications, and that he has the reproduction tunnel extension, and he has installed or will be installing here back into the car his original console. And again, we're going to have a proper shift position. The detents on the shift mechanism are clean. The action is short and very precise. And having more gears is obviously going to allow him to run at lower RPMs and have a lot more fun. So stay tuned as we take you through the journey of how we installed this TKX in Mike's beautiful 67 Chevelle. I'm back.
Came out.
Okay, let me grab a rag here because we are
They're getting drained down.
just a little bit.
Okay, hold on. We're taking the bearing with. There we go.
Okay.
Keep going. There we go. We're free. Let me bring her down. Let me get this out of here.
Piece of cake. All right.
Okay, so just so you know, this is the anti-rotation device that I made for the Muncie.
Okay, yep.
And that's how I did it. I just used basically a stud with a nut and then
Sure.
turn that down.
Yep.
And that's for this, for the tillage.
Maybe when we get it down, I'll make more note of that. We want to take a moment here to address the difference in the 4-speed bearing retainer. Mike's car here, the 67 Chevelle, he's already has a Tilton 6000 series bearing that we're just temporarily moving down. Now, obviously this collar here has an adjustment to it. There's no shims, it's threaded. You can move it in and out. There's an O-ring in the interior of this collar that goes over the top of the bearing retainer that would normally house the mechanical throwout bearing. The beauty of this design is that the collar here is fully adjustable with a very fine pitched thread, and we can just simply slide it off the original transmission, the 4-speed Muncie, and be able to put it onto the TREMEC TKX. So we're going to reestablish this height from the bearing face to the landing because the bearing retainer itself on the TKX may be thinner or thicker, and that's going to affect the overall height of this bearing assembly. And we want to make sure that we have an 1/8 inch gap between the fingers and the bearing for future clutch wear so that we have room for the clutch to expand. As the disc becomes thinner, the fingers of the clutch are going to expand. So I want to take a moment here to measure from the bell housing surface to the fingers of the clutch. So I'm going to use a standard straight edge. A lot of these are 1 inch thick. So as we go to put that, the slide rule on here, we're going to use the butt end of the mic. We're zeroed out here at the 0 position.
Let's go this way. It's probably easier.
Yeah, as long as we know the thickness, we're fine.
Yep.
So we're going to find a finger on the pressure plate here. They're all within, several thousandths of each other. And with the measurement we have here, we have 3 inch, 55 thousandths. And of course, we'll factor that into the measurement of the straight ruler as we take the same measurement when we go from bearing face to transmission face here in just a moment. Since Mike has the hydraulic system already installed from the Muncie, one of the ways that we can make this measurement is to measure from the transmission surface here. We're going to go from this surface here, which is one of the mating surfaces, to this shoulder where the bearing is going to reside. Now keep in mind the bearing normally comes in, slides up, and that collar is going to be right here at the edge of this bearing retainer guide tube. So the fact that the bearing is already installed, we can take the straight edge, make it parallel to the surface here, and then we can do a similar measurement here to understand the difference in the bearing retainer itself. This particular adjustment, again, we're only looking for a proximity of 125 to 150, and by doing this measurement, then we can compare it to the TKX and do the same measurement, and then I can do the mathematics as to what the difference was between the two of them because he's already had the 125 set up previous. So doing a little mathematics, we can achieve the same thing without having to take the bearing out of the car, re-bleed it, and measure it. Normally we would put the bearing assembly onto the bearing retainer, and then we would measure from bearing face to the transmission to establish that height by adjusting the collar, and then of course it slips over the anti-rotational pin, which will then transfer over to the TKX to keep the bearing assembly from rotating. We're not relying on the lines, we actually have a hard pin here keeping the body from moving. Since Mike here has a unique input shaft already installed in this transmission, he has a 26 spline, which is the same as the TKX transmission. So it's a 26 spline inch and a eighth diameter. Again, GM models have a 590 Pilot. Our TKX has the same. And of course, the TKX has the same bolt pattern, the Muncie, with the same registration on the bearing retainer base. So the beauty of a GM TKX is you can use your existing 4-speed bell, slides right in. Being that Mike has a 26 spline already equipped in this transmission, it makes this transition quite easy. The standard Muncie that we typically find is going to be your 10 spline, again, inch and an eighth diameter, same pilot tip, but Mike took the time here to switch out the original input shaft and put in the 26 spline shaft that was started to be available in 1970 and later, and is commonly seen in, let's say, M21s or M22s, or sometimes known as a rock crusher. I want to highlight a few more additional features of the Muncie and how it compares to the TREMEC TKX. The Muncie has a speedometer coming in driver's side left and has the screw-on type cable that it always has for many, many years. At Modern DriveLine, we offer an adapter to allow the stock cable to be retained, and so that there's a minimal amount of change or fuss. This is the adapter that we offer. Now, all of the TREMEC TKXs use a Ford style drive. They just have decided that's the key way of doing it. There's normally a gear here on the end with a clip. There's a shaft that drives this through, and then this allows this adapter here to allow the connection to be the same. As you can see also with the shifter on this transmission, it is in the stock location. Now this particular plate indicates to me this is a B body or Impala plate that was installed by a previous owner, and the shifter was actually a little further back than it should be. And when you look at some of the details of the transmission coming out, he actually had to take and modify the plate, and we're going ahead and we're going to put a good stock replacement piece in. So in this particular case, there was some liberties taken to clearance this, and you can see it's a little further back than normal. What we're going to do, however, during the installation process is replace it with an OEM reproduction piece so we can retain the factory opening, and the TKX is going to clear that with no trouble whatsoever. And then we're going to put the console on top, and everything's going to look like it was born this way. The other nice feature of the TREMEC TKX GM model is that we have the same mounting point. So we can literally take this transmission isolator and transfer it from the Muncie or automatic, if we were working with an automatic, and transfer it over to the TKX and retain it. Let's talk about the crossmember on the car and how we're going to retain it and the modifications necessary for that before we get into doing the TKX, because I want to show you those details. All right, I spoke about that crossmember just a moment ago. This is the factory crossmember, and it's retained. There's no reason to change the crossmember in a Chevelle in this particular year, this being 67, so 64, technically all the way like 72, we can retain this crossmember here. Because this is a full frame car, there are a series of holes at the end here, so we can actually move this crossmember further back on the frame, and all we have to do is drill one additional hole to make that fit.
Thanks for watching part 1 of this 5-part series, covering the complete installation of an MDL modified shift position TKX into a 67 Chevelle. Be sure to catch the rest of this series available at youtube.com/Modern DriveLine Inc., where you'll find a playlist. Subscribe to our channel to be notified. If the next episode in this series is already available, a link will appear now. Thanks for making it modern.